Imagine a moment of absolute stillness. You stir from a slumber that feels older than time itself, awakening into a void where memory does not exist. You possess no name, no history, no scars of the past, and no anchors to any specific identity. Glancing downward, you find no flesh or bone, but merely a shimmering, translucent wisp of potentiality, a ghost in the machine of existence. You are suspended in an infinite, blindingly white expanse, a tabula rasa of consciousness. Before you looms a monolithic screen, pulsing with a single, cryptic directive: fabricate reality. Initiate the architecture of society. With a tentative touch, the interface blooms open, cascading with the fundamental source code of civilization. You are tasked with drafting the blueprint of a new world, the very society into which you will eventually be incarnated. Every variable is yours to control. You must calibrate the legal frameworks, the distribution of resources, the intricate dynamics of power, the definitions of liberty, and the safety nets for the vulnerable. You act as a god deciding the fate of mortals, yet a terrifying caveat quickly dawns upon you. Once this design phase concludes, you will be thrust into this world, but you have absolutely no foreknowledge of who you will become. You are designing a lottery where you are also the prize, or the victim. You do not know if you will materialize as a billionaire or a beggar, a king or a captive. You are blind to your future race, gender, physical capability, intellect, or sexual orientation. You cannot predict if you will be born with a silver spoon or into the crushing grip of generational poverty. Stripped of all personal bias by this profound uncertainty, self-preservation dictates your logic. To protect yourself from the worst possible outcome, you meticulously engineer a system of radical fairness. You ensure that the lowest rung of this societal ladder is still dignified, that justice is blind, and that opportunity is universal. You construct a sanctuary where, even if you are dealt the worst hand, the game remains playable. Satisfied with this masterpiece of equity, you strike the finalize command. This haunting scenario is a reimagining of the veil of ignorance, a thought experiment derived from the original position, famously articulated by the American political philosopher John Rawls in his seminal work, A Theory of Justice. Rawls posited this intellectual exercise as a mechanism to strip away our inherent biases, forcing us to view justice through a lens of absolute neutrality. Ideally, the architects of our laws and social contracts would operate from this vantage point. Yet, even as we admire the elegance of this ideal, we collide with a rigid, uncomfortable reality: the original position is a phantom. It is a psychological impossibility. Rawls himself conceded the limits of his creation, acknowledging that the original position is a purely hypothetical state, a navigational star rather than a destination we can physically reach. He wrote that it is doubtful whether one can ever reach this state of pure equilibrium. We are creatures of context, inextricably bound by our own subjective experiences. This realization drags us toward our first devastating philosophical impasse, the problem of fairness. If true neutrality is a mirage, and if every decision-maker is fundamentally tainted by their own self-interest, bias, and limited perspective, is the concept of objective fairness merely a delusion? Can justice ever truly exist in a world built by biased architects? However, the veil of ignorance exposes a vulnerability far deeper than just the bias of the lawmaker. It illuminates the terrifying architecture of chance. We do not select our parents, our genetics, our geography, or the era of our birth. Whether we emerge into a life of abundance or squalor is a matter of cosmic roulette. Furthermore, the trajectory of our lives is continuously buffered by unpredictable variables. This realization ushers us toward a second, perhaps more unsettling conundrum: the problem of moral luck. First crystallized by Bernard Williams and later dissected with surgical precision by Thomas Nagel, moral luck challenges our deepest intuitions about responsibility. It describes the unsettling paradox where a moral agent is praised or condemned for outcomes that were largely determined by factors explicitly beyond their control. To understand this, we must accept the premise of a moral agent, a conscious being capable of distinguishing right from wrong. In his landmark essay, Nagel categorizes this phenomenon into four distinct pillars: resultant, circumstantial, constitutive, and causal luck. Let us examine resultant moral luck through the lens of a gritty, neon-soaked tragedy. Picture two dive bars, separated only by a few city blocks. In the first, sits Tom. In the second, sits Larry. Both men are, by all accounts, average citizens, neither saints nor demons. But tonight, the air is thick with tension, and both men find themselves locking horns with strangers. Alcohol fuels their aggression, and the arguments spill over into physical violence. It is a scene replayed thousands of times daily across the globe. Tom, in a flash of rage, throws a punch. It connects with his opponent's jaw. The opponent stumbles, swings back, and eventually, the bouncers drag them apart. Tom is ejected into the cool night air, nursing a bruised knuckle and a bruised ego, but he walks home a free man. Meanwhile, Larry, mirroring Tom's actions with haunting precision, throws a punch with the exact same velocity and intent. He, too, connects. But in this timeline, physics plays a cruel trick. Larry's opponent stumbles backward at an awkward angle, their head cracking against the concrete floor with a sickening thud. The stranger never wakes up. Larry is handcuffed, charged with manslaughter, and erased from society for a decade. Here lies the horror: Tom and Larry committed the identical act. Their intent was the same, their malice was equal. Yet, due solely to the capricious nature of physics, a variable of pure chance, Larry is branded a monster, while Tom is merely a rowdy patron. One man's bad night is another man's life sentence. Now, consider circumstantial moral luck. Let us drift to a third bar, where we find Marcus. He is just as angry, just as intoxicated, and just as ready to shatter a jaw as Tom and Larry. He pulls back his fist, muscles coiled to strike, but in that split second, the building's fire alarm shrieks. The jarring noise shatters the tension, the crowd panics, and the fight evaporates as patrons flood the exits. Marcus would have punched the man, he had the will and the capability, but the randomness of a faulty sensor saved him. He is morally innocent in the eyes of the law, yet his internal moral compass was pointed in the exact same direction as the killer, Larry. Deeper still lies constitutive moral luck, the lottery of our internal wiring. In a fourth establishment, we observe Stephanie. She engages in a similar altercation, strikes a fatal blow, and stands over a body. However, the courtroom drama reveals a harrowing history. Stephanie was subjected to relentless childhood abuse and suffers from severe untreated borderline personality disorder. Her brain is wired for hyperaggression, her impulse control is chemically non-existent. The legal system, recognizing she is a prisoner of her own biology and trauma, mandates psychiatric care rather than prison. This seems merciful, but it forces us to look back at Larry. Larry wasn't abused. He has no diagnosis. He is just, naturally, aggressive and selfish. But did Larry choose his brain chemistry? Did he visit a character select screen before birth and maximize his aggression stats? Larry is the endpoint of a genetic lineage and environmental conditioning he did not author. If Stephanie is absolved because her past dictated her present, why is Larry condemned for his own unchosen personality traits? This leads us to the terrifying precipice of causal moral luck. If our actions are the domino effect of genetics, upbringing, and external stimuli, none of which we chose, can we truly claim ownership of our morality? We do not hold a rabid dog morally accountable for biting, we euthanize it for safety, but we do not call it evil. We do not put a tornado on trial for destroying a home, we recognize it as a force of nature. Why, then, do we view ourselves as separate from the natural order? We suffer from what Albert Einstein called an optical delusion of consciousness, believing we are isolated pilots of our bodies rather than integral, deterministic waves in the ocean of the universe. If our agency is an illusion, we crash into our third limitation, the problem of moral knowledge. Upon what foundation do we build our definition of good? This brings us to the is-ought problem, a guillotine for ethical arguments sharpened by the Scottish philosopher David Hume. Hume argued that one cannot logically derive an ought, a moral prescription, from an is, a statement of fact. You can describe the universe down to the atom, but nowhere in that description will you find a particle of justice or a molecule of rightness. We attempt to bridge this gap with religion, emotion, or reason. Religion relies on circular faith, emotions are fickle and culturally programmed. Even the modern scientific approach, championed by thinkers like Sam Harris in The Moral Landscape, which equates morality with the maximization of well-being, smuggles in an assumption. It presupposes that the well-being of conscious creatures ought to be the objective value. But the universe offers no proof that our well-being matters. Objective implies truth independent of opinion, yet morality seems entirely dependent on the subjective experience of the observer. We are trapped in a loop, unable to find a bedrock of moral truth that exists outside of our own desperate desire for it to exist. So, where does this leave us? We are biased architects trapped in a deterministic machine, judging one another based on luck, with no objective manual for right and wrong. The picture is bleak. However, the solution to these interlocking puzzles may not be an equation, but an attitude. If we accept that fairness is flawed, that luck rules our fates, and that objective morality is elusive, the only rational response is not nihilism, but radical compassion. We must cultivate a profound, forgiving understanding for the absurdity of the human condition. We must look at the monster, and see the unlucky confluence of genetics and trauma. We must look at the saint, and see the fortunate alignment of temperament and opportunity. This does not mean we abandon laws or consequences, we must still protect society from the tornado and the violent dog. But we can do so without the toxic weight of moral superiority and hatred. We are all castaways on this rock, none of us having chosen our vessel or the winds that push us. Compassion is the only thread that holds the fabric of civilization together against the entropy of luck. As the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer so eloquently concluded, it is this shared suffering that binds us. Boundless compassion for all living beings is the surest and most certain guarantee of pure moral conduct, and needs no casuistry. Whoever is filled with it will assuredly injure no one, do harm to no one, encroach on no man's rights. He will rather have regard for every one, forgive every one, help every one as far as he can, and all his actions will bear the stamp of justice and loving kindness.